So.
You're still muted, Dave. You're still muted. There you go. You're fine now.
Okay, we okay?
Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today. She is Rebecca Zip, Chief Deputy City Attorney for Sex Crimes and Domestic Violence, the Sex Crimes and Domestic Violence Unit. In that capacity, Rebecca oversees 15 attorneys responsible for investigating and prosecuting elder abuse and financial crimes. It seems like scams involving seniors are constantly taking on new twists. One scam fades away, and there's another one right behind it to fill the void. Sadly, the COVID-19 epidemic spawned a whole new array of ways for heartless schemers to take advantage of people ailing from the pandemic. I've also read recently in the AARP magazine of the thriving industry of separating people from their money using digital gift cards. Personally, I've experienced, I had a telephone call a couple of months ago from a person portraying themselves as being from SDG&E. And the pitch was that my smart meter was not working properly and needed to be replaced immediately at a cost of $500 some odd. And if I didn't come up with the $500 to pay for the replacement meter, my services would be cut off. So, you know, these things, when you think back on them, they're just stunning, and they knock you off balance. So that's what you really need to be careful about, is that you keep your composure when you're talking to them. In this particular instance, I was told that not to worry about the money, I would be refunded within 90 days. So thankfully, I had enough presence of mind to say no thanks. I'm sure Rebecca will tell us, when you think you've heard it all, just wait a minute. These people are relentless. So here's Rebecca to bring us up to date on what the scams du jour are. Please welcome Rebecca Zip.
All right, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. So thank you for that introduction, Dave. I'm going to start with a digression. It's such a small world here in San Diego. I was listening to you talk about the Voice of San Diego event coming up, and Kira Green is a good friend of mine. We're in the same book club. She's not a lawyer. I don't know her professionally, but just in my personal life. So that's kind of a fun connection. But to move ahead with the presentation, I have been a prosecutor for 13 years. I spent most of that time at the district attorney's office here in San Diego. And 2 years ago, I joined the city attorney's office. So I'm very excited about these Prop B developments. I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework for today, and then I'll jump right in. So we know that a lot of scammers do target older people. So I'm going to talk about why that is. But at the outset, I want to assure you that scammers do target all kinds of people, and that anyone can fall victim to a scam. And these people are very good at what they do. They otherize their victims so that they don't see you as a person. And so if you do fall victim to a scam, you should not blame yourself or feel stupid. I have talked to many people in my career who have those feelings, but they're obviously not alone. You know, that the scammers have work with a goal in mind, and they're very good at what they do. So you shouldn't blame yourself, and you shouldn't feel bad if you do fall victim to one of these. They're very sophisticated. I'm going to talk about the factors that make some of us, primarily older adults, easier targets of scams. I'll talk about the red flags of investment scams. I'll talk about the latest COVID scams. Like Dave says, these people are relentless. It never stops. You know, a year ago, we were talking about different types of COVID scams than we're talking about today. As you know, we've sort of hopefully gotten through the crest of the pandemic, and now there's an end in sight. The scammers are still out there taking advantage. And then I'll briefly discuss common criminal charges, indicate a few resources that you may want to look into if you are concerned that someone is targeting you in a scam, or if you have a friend who's concerned. And throughout, I will provide tips on avoiding falling victim to some of these scams. So let's see if I'm able to change my slide. Doesn't look like I did. Let me try again. Same slide. I'm going to stop sharing and come back. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, great. So this is a picture of the brain. I have no formal background in neuroscience, so please don't ask questions about this because I am telling you everything I know. Anything else, you'll have to ask somebody else. Why is it that elders are uniquely vulnerable to scams? And it has to do partly with brain function. So the prefrontal cortex is in the frontal lobe of the brain, and that's the part of the brain that processes risk, fear, emotion, and decision-making. And for whatever reason, regardless of otherwise stellar cognitive function, at age 55, this part of the brain starts to decline in its function. And so we become more susceptible to making rash financial decisions at 55 years old. This is true even for people who are still working at the top of their fields. You could be a neuroscientist, a professor, an accountant working well into your 80s. But this part of your brain, even though you're able to do everything else in your life, it's starting on the downward decline as early as 55. And this is because aging disproportionately affects the frontal lobe of the brain, resulting in a decreased ability to process information in a rapid and complex manner. And then we have increased susceptibility to scams that involve urgency. Many scams involve urgency and visceral or emotional information, right? And COVID has been a very emotional, very frightening year plus. And so that's right for scammers to jump in and take advantage of the situation. But I want to emphasize that this prefrontal cortex deterioration is unrelated to dementia. So you can be going about your life, great at driving, great at working, otherwise making great decisions. But in this specific area, you're going to start seeing decline fairly early. Although there is some evidence that people who are already emotional, disorganized, and impulsive may see greater decrease in prefrontal cortex function at that point in their life, mid-50s, than people who are less emotional, less impulsive, and more organized. So keep an eye on your disorganized friends. So that's the first reason, is the brain function. And then the next one is loneliness. And I'm sorry, I'm having some issues sharing going to the next slide. So I'm not sure why that is, but I'm gonna have to, oh, there we go, okay. So loneliness is another reason that we fall victim to scams. And last year I read an article about a surveyor. She worked for a legitimate company that called people about political opinions and marketing trends and whatnot. And she found that people were much likelier to speak to her, and they stayed on the phone a lot longer than normal because they were lonely. And older people are more likely to live alone in modern times than we have been historically. And one of the best ways to fight fraud is to fight isolation and keep close ties in your lives, which has been really challenging this year. But you're all here at this meeting, so you have found a way to stay engaged, at least with this group, which is terrific. I know it's difficult when your whole life is on Zoom to keep those connections, but you have, so that's great socially, and it's great because it may prevent you from falling victim to a scam, this presentation aside. And then finally, fear. Scammers prey on fear of missing out, a fear that I'm not where I thought I would be or should be financially at this point in my life, a fear of unknown, right? And COVID, now we're so used to it, but when this pandemic started, there were so many unknowns. How is it transmitted? How likely am I to get sick or die if I catch it? Am I interacting with people who don't have it? How do I prevent myself from catching it? So they really took advantage of a lot of that fear at the time. And early in the pandemic, there were all these medication offers that could keep you from getting COVID or cure COVID. that were scammy, because the scammers read the news just like we do, and they know what's going on, and then they alter their scam to take advantage of whatever the big story is, so that it sounds real. One thing that you can do to protect yourself from imposter scams is to arm yourself with information. And I know Dave recently had an experience, and just know that the IRS is never going to call you to demand money. You know, I've had people call me. I kind of played with them. I said, oh, there's a warrant for my arrest. Can you give me the warrant number, please? Can you give me the case number, please? I'd like to look it up. I mean, it wastes their time, so they can't call the next person. And it shows them that at least some people, you know, are aware of the facts and are paying attention. I know if there's a warrant out for my arrest, I'll be able to look it up. But I don't think there is one because my work ID worked today. And last year during the census, we saw some issues, but you know, the census only asks for very basic information. They're not going to ask for any of your personal identifying information, but we're past the census. So brain function, loneliness, and fear are some of the factors that make older adults very attractive targets for scammers. I'm going to see if I am able to switch my page here without any drama this time. Okay, great. So like I said, anyone can fall victim to a scam. This is a copy of a text message that I received last week when I was finalizing this presentation. And it's from an unknown number, as you can see. And it says, your Amazon account is temporarily restricted. Well, I went into panic. I get all the necessities of life from Amazon: diapers, wipes, lotion, all that stuff. I can't live without Amazon. And then it says, please confirm to restore access. And there's a link, which is a bit.ly link, so not the actual web address that it invites me to click on. But then it goes on and it invites me to reply stop to opt out. So they're asking me to do two things, which are red flags, because it's coming from an unknown number. So I normally get my Amazon communications via email. You know, they email me every time something ships or goes from Ohio to Pennsylvania, or however it makes its way to me. And I didn't have any notifications in my email. I went on my Amazon account and tried to buy something, and it worked. But since I had this presentation coming up, I spent a little time on this. And I found a reverse website looker-upper, and I figured out where this bit.ly led to. And it led to a Shopify website with the first part of the name, Komari, is apparently an Ethiopian name. And I don't think I bought anything through Amazon from any Ethiopian companies. So, you know, normally I wouldn't go through all this to investigate a scammy text, but, you know, I was going to be talking to you. And it's interesting that it asked me to do two different things. So even if I knew not to click the link, it's still inviting me to reply. But if I reply, I'm telling the person on the other end of that text or the computer, hey, I'm a real person. Keep texting me. Call me. Maybe one day I'll fall victim to one of your scams. So I didn't respond at all. I didn't go to that website. I just, you know, figured out what it was. And, you know, fortunately, my diapers and wipes and all that good stuff keep coming. So is it a scam? There are certain red flags, and this applies to COVID scams, all kinds of scams, but I'm going to focus on investment fraud because these are scams where you stand to lose a lot of money, all your retirement, all your savings, potentially your home. And I have unfortunately had the experience of meeting with multiple people who have had that experience where they've lost $50, $100, $500,000, in one case, $4 million to an investment fraud scam. So these are some common factors. You may have heard them before, but it certainly bears review. So the first red flag is too good to be true. If it seems too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And with this one, I always think that a touch of humility is helpful. We all want to feel like we're special, but if someone comes to you with a special deal, why do they have access to this special deal? Why are they offering it to me? Because as much as my mother thinks I'm special, I'm not that special. Why are they going to be offering me that deal? So a little humility is helpful if you're offered something that's too good to be true. The next one we see is guaranteed. And this happened in a case I prosecuted at the district attorney's office, where these people had a legitimate looking office in San Diego. They had all of the credentials, you know, they were on the FINRA website. but they offered a guaranteed investment. It's a known thing, it's guaranteed. Well, the whole point of an investment is it's not guaranteed, and that's why you stand to make money on the investment. But you wouldn't be earning any money on the investment if there was no chance of loss. So I always think of my CD that's earning what, 1.7%, right? I mean, even that's not totally guaranteed. It's backed up by the banks and the FDIC, but you know, that's a very low return. So any investment where you're guaranteed to make money, I would run the other way. Because if you read the fine print, if they do have the fine print, and a lot of them do, it does carry language about risk, because every investment carries a risk. It's inherent in the product. Consistent returns. That was another thing that a couple of the men that I prosecuted guaranteed their clients. We have consistent returns over time. Look, every quarter we're making 12%. Well, maybe it was in the past, but we don't know if it's going to be consistent in the future. And, you know, the market ebbs and flows. And if you're showing 3 years of 12% returns every quarter, there's probably something wrong with your numbers, or maybe you just manufactured them. And in one case, the product wasn't even 3 years old, but they were showing all these consistent returns because they were simply fabricated, right? So that's a really easy way to show consistent returns, just make it up. And, you know, I think we learned with Bernie Madoff, there's no such thing as 20% consistent returns. And if that was a real thing, Mr. Madoff would be free and not in prison. Another common feature of scams is offering low risk for high returns, which I kind of covered in some of the earlier items. But it bears repeating that if there's low risk, there's not going to be high returns, or you shouldn't expect high returns. You get high returns if you're able to take on a lot of risk, which is fine if you can afford to lose the money. But if you can't afford to lose the money, you don't want to, you know, go after those high returns, because you could lose everything. Then my other favorite, today only. You know, if someone says this, just run the other way. If it's a legitimate investment opportunity, it will be there tomorrow. It will be there in a week. You know, I mean, the worst thing I ever missed out on was a CD. It was 3%. I thought about it. I went back and it was 2.7%. You know, that's not going to break me. Okay. And so it's always worth it to take the time to reflect. And I think it's really important to have an out and to have an exit plan anytime you're talking with someone about finances, which can be hard to do if you receive an unsolicited call and you start talking to someone and realize it is a sales pitch. But if you're meeting with an investment advisor or a professional, because unfortunately sometimes they do scam people, don't let them pressure you into it. And I really like the exit plan of, all right, well, thank you, but I never invest money without talking to. It can be your husband, your wife, your daughter, your accountant, your rabbi, just someone. I never invest without talking to this person in my life, and I can't reach them right now, so I'll call you back tomorrow. That is a perfectly reasonable response. And even if they try to overcome the objection, then you can just say, I just want to talk to my daughter first. I always talk to her. She'll be very upset with me if I don't. And end of story. They might call you stupid, but you're not. They're just angry that they are not making money off of you because you are too smart to fall for their tricks. So those are some of the red flags that I've seen in numerous investment or securities fraud schemes. All right, so on to 2021, because we still have it, COVID scams. Like I said, these have evolved over the last year, and I mentioned some of the ones that came about at the onset of COVID, but you know, we've advanced. So hopefully most of you have one of these. I do. I haven't posted it online. You know why? It has personal information on there. So please don't post it online. You can post a picture of yourself, you know, getting the shot. That's great. But if you have posted your vaccination card, you probably want to take it down because it has personal information about you. So these scammers are very creative. I got to give them credit for that. Early in the pandemic, they had scams including those pricey COVID cures, high-priced COVID testing, which you don't have to pay for most COVID tests. They're trying to get people to pay for vaccines. So everyone's been locked down for over a year. People with health conditions, older people are particularly prone to get very sick or get killed from COVID. And the scammers are taking advantage of this and saying, hey, you can't get an appointment? I have an appointment for you. Just pay me this exorbitant fee and I'll get you a vaccine. There is no place where you can pay for a vaccine. They are all being distributed through the government free. So if someone tries to get you to pay for a vaccine, that is not legitimate. This goes for always, but don't share your personal, financial, or health information with people you don't know. No one from a vaccine distribution site, no one from your doctor's office, no one from a pharmacy, no one from a pharmaceutical company is going to call, text, or email you asking for your social security number, your credit card number, your bank account number in order to sign you up to get the vaccine, right? And they do need some information. I had to give them my health insurance card when I got my vaccine, but why would they need my bank account number, right? So sometimes if you just take a step back and why is this information needed? You can sort of self-reflect your way out of the situation. There are now vaccine scam surveys. So you post your card online. I got the Pfizer vaccine, lucky me, I didn't have to be sick after the second dose like all my Moderna friends. And then I get a call from Pfizer. Oh, we're doing a survey. There's a prize if you participate in the survey. I just need your bank account number. I just need your social security number. That's not a real thing. So if someone from Pfizer or Moderna calls you, hang up. They wouldn't call you if there was some sort of issue. You would probably get a call from the local county health department and not from one of the pharmaceutical vaccine manufacturers. There's no prize for any surveys from Pfizer or Moderna. The prize is the vaccine, right? Contact tracers. This has been ripe for fraudsters for many months. People download the Contact Tracer app on their phone, and then if they do have contact someone who's tested positive for COVID, they'll receive a text or a call from their local health department. But legitimate contact tracers will not ask you for insurance information, bank account information, your social security number, your credit card numbers, and they won't ask you for a payment, right? They work for the government. They work, for the public. So there's no fee for individual users that they reach out to, just like you all worked for the public and no one was charged a fee for your service, I guess, depending on your classification. And then never click on a link emailed or texted by an unknown sender. So again, I refer you to my text purporting to be from Amazon. And then I don't know if you're sharing the slides with this audience, but I do have a link on there for COVID-19 contact tracing scams for all the latest because they are always developing. And it was funny, my 10-year-old helped me with the transitions on these slides because he knew things I didn't about PowerPoint, having spent the year on Zoom school. And he said, Mom, why would they click on that link? You just told them not to click on links where they don't know the sender. And I said, all right, that's a really good point. So you don't have to click on the link, but it is an HTTPS, which means it is a secure website. And so therefore likelier to be a safe link as opposed to one lacking the S. The reason that's important is, and the reason I really didn't want to click on that link is because sometimes when people text or email you a mysterious link like this, if you do go to the link, it sends malware to your phone. And in my phone, I have health information, my banking app, really sensitive work information. So I don't want some stranger to get into my phone. I mean, they're probably most interested in the banking information, let's be honest, but there's also really sensitive information about people's criminal history that, members of the general public shouldn't have access to for a lot of good reasons. So you don't want to click on one of those links because like me, you probably have a lot of personal information in your phone that you don't want them to have access to. And if you do trust me and you do get these slides, you can click on the link, but you don't have to click on the link. It's going to be there. I'm not pressuring you. There's no time pressure, and it's not a limited quantity. Okay, it's a government website. It's going to be there. Some criminal charges that we commonly file in these types of cases are Penal Code Section 530.5. That's identity theft. So anytime I go to a bank and I use Dave's information to try to withdraw money from his account, that's a 530.5 offense. Penal Code Section 360, and that can be a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on the specifics of the incident. Penal Code Section 368 is elder abuse. That includes financial abuse, physical abuse. So if I, steal a bicycle from a kid, that's just a theft. If I steal a bicycle from someone over the age of 65, who I reasonably should have known was over the age of 65, that's a 368. And, for physical abuse, it's really a wonderful charge for us to have, because sometimes the consequences can be more serious than a simple battery. And also for practical purposes, when the judge or the jury hears elder abuse, they take that more seriously than they might a simple battery, which could have just been a fight. But one of the things I tell my junior lawyers as they're learning how to charge elder abuse cases, we can't file every case. We reject some of our cases. And sometimes we get these elder abuse cases and they say, well, I can't disprove mutual combat. And I say, look, you're right. You don't have enough evidence to charge this case, but mutual combat, how old is your victim? They're 92, they weigh 100 pounds, and your suspect, they're 50 years old and they weigh 200 pounds. I'm not worried about mutual combat. There might be other issues, but that's not a concern for me in this case. Next, I have two corporations code sections. The first one is for securities fraud, and the second one is for selling an unregistered security. So that's a lower level misdemeanor offense, but it can be related to the first one. And then finally, Business and Professions Code 17200. And that's a really flexible, useful code for going after unscrupulous businesses. And it's unlawful business practice. So that's a really helpful section, whether you're focused specifically on protecting elders or protecting the general public or consumers from, scams and other shady practices. So if you have been targeted by a fraudster, there are ways to report it. And it can be a little bit of a maze, right? I talk often about federalism. We have city authorities and county, but we also have state and federal. And so you may get routed from one agency to another. But some of your options, depending on the type of fraud, you can contact the National Center for Disaster Fraud. There's a phone number, there's an email. That email is manned by an assistant United States attorney. So if you email information, a lawyer who works for the federal government as a prosecutor will review that information. There's the Federal Trade Commission, your local police department. Sometimes you might report a scam to the police department and they'll say, well, that's not a crime, that's civil. They don't really know. They have to learn a lot of things to be a police officer, and the weird nuance between civil and criminal offense, particularly with scams, is not one of their focus areas at the academy. But you can always call the DA's office and ask to speak to someone in the Economic Crimes Division. And you can call my office or email my office. Often if it's a larger scam, we will refer people to their local police agency or to the district attorney's office because we only have jurisdiction over misdemeanors. So if the scam involves loss of $950 or more, that would be a felony. And that would be in the province of the DA. Adult Protective Services, always a good number to know about. We've mostly talked about scams here, but of course, as people get older and more vulnerable, sometimes their caregivers may mistreat them. I think the world of our local APS. I think they're a well-oiled machine. I have great respect for their supervisors. Recently, I had a neighbor that I was concerned about, and I called APS to express my concerns. And the things I was seeing that led me to cause APS went away. So I don't know if the person is totally safe, but the things that really made me worried enough to make that call, I'm not seeing them anymore. And I can only infer that they did their job and did it well. And then there's the California Department of Business Oversight, which is a sort of obscure state agency, but they function similarly to the SEC, but on a state level. So they'll handle securities fraud cases that are specific to California. So that's the extent of my presentation. I don't know if we have time for any questions, but I want to thank you very much for spending part of your Tuesday with me and letting me talk to you about this topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Can you get the can you get us back to our
Yeah.
the slides? I do think we have a few moments for where is Rebecca? Oh, there she is. A few more minutes for questions of Rebecca. So share a hand if somebody have a question, please.
I'd like to ask Rebecca to comment if she can on the Gina Champion-Kane issue. She has been sentenced now, so maybe you can. But it was just amazing to me, the number of people out there who did not abide by the cautionary signs you covered in your presentation. And it's all, I attribute it all to greed. And they lost a lot of money. And there's so many of them. Any comment?
Yes. So, we all have greed, right? We all want money and we all want more of it. Maybe some of us are less susceptible to it than others, but these scammers really speak to our greed. And I don't know the specifics about how, she lured people in, but, a lot of these people build trust. And this is why affinity fraud is a big problem. With Bernie Madoff, who I mentioned earlier, his investors all trusted him. He was a pillar of the Jewish community. And then other Jewish people and Jewish institutions trusted him with their funds because he was one of them. So he wouldn't rip me off. We see this a lot in military communities as well. Well, I was in the Navy and he was in the Navy, so I can just trust him. And then we let our guard down. So I don't know if there was affinity with her, but she probably did establish trust with her investors. What I did think was interesting about the case is the whole 4 years that I prosecuted these investment fraud cases at the DA, I had 0 female defendants. So I thought it was kind of interesting that she was the mastermind of this huge fraud that the federal government, prosecuted. She went to jail for a long time, but she's really an anomaly because most of these criminals are men, from what I've seen.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay. Any other questions, please? Well, I guess you've answered all our questions. So
All right, good.
Kudos to Rebecca for a wonderful presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much for your time and your efforts. And
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you very much. So unless there's some further questions, I think we've come to the end of our meeting. And so I wish everybody well. I hope everybody's been vaccinated and everybody's doing well. So stay safe out there, and we'll see you in a month.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, Jim.